The morning I realized I'd walked into a war zone, the sky was sherbet orange. One of those quiet Southern California sunrises that makes you think maybe, just maybe, peace is possible. Then came a clipboard. It slapped my windshield like a declaration of war. A laminated violation notice, taped with surgical precision, fluttered slightly in the breeze as I stood there holding my coffee, watching the ink run from dew. Aesthetic violation. Commercial vehicles in driveway. Fine. $500. The signature at the bottom was sharp, confident, and familiar. Linda Hawthorne, HOA president. My jaw clenched. Not from surprise, just from exhaustion. I'd been here 6 weeks. 6 weeks since I bought the 3-bedroom ranch house with cash, looking for peace after a divorce that left everything but my name in a courtroom spreadsheet. It wasn't heartbreak that brought me to Maple Ridge. It was silence. The idea of fresh mulch, trimmed hedges, and neighbors who smiled without asking questions. I was a third-generation contractor, Torres Concrete Solutions, and all I wanted was a house with enough driveway for my trucks and enough space to breathe. But Linda Hawthorne wasn't about breathing room. She was about control. She appeared exactly 2 minutes after I peeled the notice off the windshield, her heels clicking down the sidewalk like the second hand on a doomsday clock. "Good morning, Mr. Torres," she said, crisp as glass. "I trust you've reviewed the notice?" I turned slowly, taking her in. Late 50s. Blazer too sharp for the morning hour. Eyes like frostbite, and a smile so tight it looked painful. "You tape a fine to my truck." She tilted her head, as if that fact required translation. "You're parking commercial vehicles in a residential community." "There were trucks," I replied calm. "Parked in my own driveway. Registered. Insured. Clean." Linda's smile widened by a centimeter. Community image is a shared responsibility. I sipped my coffee. "Is that why your husband's RV blocks the entire street corner?" A flicker, just for a second, then back to the mask. "That's grandfathered in," she said. Of course it was. Most people don't know when a war starts. They only recognize it in hindsight, long after the first shot was fired. But I knew. It was the way she looked at me, not like a neighbor, but like a threat. As if my presence was a crack in the marble facade she'd spent 6 years building. A contractor. A divorcee. Someone with calluses and trucks. I didn't belong in her picture-perfect suburb, and she was going to erase me. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by unpacked boxes and old memories and did what any man who's lost too much does. I started reading. I read the HOA covenant line by line, highlighting every clause, every loophole. Nothing in there about commercial vehicles. Nothing illegal. But plenty of vague language about community harmony and aesthetic standards. Legal gray areas are a favorite playground of tyrants. Linda had weaponized ambiguity and called it order. I thought about walking away, paying the fine, letting it go. But I poured concrete for 20 years. I know what happens when you ignore a hairline crack. It spreads. It splits. And then one day, the whole foundation collapses and everyone asks why nobody saw it coming. This wasn't about trucks. It was about who gets to decide who belongs. So I stood up, tossed the violation notice into the trash, and looked out the window at my work trucks gleaming in the fading sun like quiet soldiers. I didn't start this, I muttered to no one, but I sure as hell was going to finish it. The first time I saw Linda Hawthorne's house, I almost laughed. Not because it was ugly. Far from it. The place looked like a colonial estate had been lifted from a luxury magazine and dropped smack in the middle of Maple Ridge. Manicured hedges, black shutters, and a stone fountain that served no purpose except to say, "I'm in charge." The second time I saw it, she was measuring her lawn with a ruler. Not a figure of speech. A real, stainless steel ruler. Bent over like a forensic investigator in a crime scene, jotting numbers into a leather-bound notebook. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about order. Linda's obsession with perfection bordered on religious. And I was the heretic on her holy ground. 3 days after the windshield violation, I got a certified letter. Emergency HOA compliance hearing, attendance mandatory. The paper was printed on cheap stock, but the threat behind it was premium grade. The meeting would be held in Linda's living room. Of course it would. The evening arrived with the kind of quiet tension you feel before a storm. Her home smelled like vanilla candles and courtroom anxiety. Plush carpets, symmetrical decor, and 3 HOA board members arranged on antique chairs like a tribunal. Linda, Margaret Finch, retired school principal, and Bob Simmons, a landlord who'd clearly lost interest the moment he sat down. Linda opened with a smile that could curdle cream. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Torres. We'd like to address your non-compliance regarding vehicle storage." "I park my trucks in my driveway," I said, voice steady. "There's no covenant against it." Margaret cleared her throat. "The board has authority to introduce emergency standards for community welfare." Linda folded her hands like a villain in a soap opera. "The new ordinance prohibits visible commercial vehicles." I looked around. No agenda. No notice. No vote. "You passed a rule," I said, "without notifying the community, and now you're fining me for breaking it?" Bob shrugged. "We voted before you got here." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It slipped out like a cough, quick and involuntary. "That's cute," I said. "Illegal, but cute." Linda's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Torres, your attitude won't help your case." "My case?" I leaned forward. "You run a kangaroo court from your living room and think I'm going to roll over? You've got your son's landscaping crew parking diesel rigs twice a week on this very street. Your husband's RV hasn't moved since Reagan was in office." Her smile cracked. "That's different." That word again. Different. As in, you're not one of us. As in, your trucks are a problem, but ours are character. That night, I sat on my back porch with a beer and a legal pad. The stars were out. My cruise trucks sat quiet in the driveway, their steel frames glinting under the porch light like sleeping giants. I listed names. Mrs. Morgan, sweet widow next door. Got a citation last month for unauthorized lawn ornaments. She had 3 ceramic gnomes. Jake Patterson, journalist turned stay-at-home dad. Cited for garage disarray because his twins leave bikes everywhere. Sarah Mills, public school teacher. Fined for non-conforming vehicle aesthetic because she drives a 2012 Civic instead of an Audi. Linda was compiling a hit list, and I was starting to see the pattern. Not one of her targets drove a luxury car. Not one had country club connections. Every single one of us had calluses, modest homes, or last names that didn't appear on golf plaques. She wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was cleansing it. I stared at the legal pad until the ink started to blur. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was war by paperwork. Linda thought she was playing chess, but she didn't realize I've been building things since I was 14. Concrete doesn't care about class or status. It cares about structure, about foundation. And right now, her little kingdom was starting to crack. I stood at the front counter of the recorder's office. The afternoon sun filtered through dusty blinds, lighting up motes in the air like suspended ash. The clerk, a woman named Dorothy who looked like she'd been filing papers since the Nixon administration, adjusted her glasses and slid a thick manila folder onto the counter. "Subdivision records from '87, like you asked," she said, her voice like gravel and peppermint. I nodded. "Thanks." I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. I only knew that Linda was winning battles one violation at a time, and I needed a bigger weapon. Something legal. Something structural. Call it a contractor's instinct. You don't keep patching cracks when the entire foundation is bad. You tear it down and rebuild. The first hour was a sea of legalese. Parcel IDs, easements, water rights. Then I saw it. Lot 17A. My address. And something different. Unlike every other parcel labeled residential, mine had 2 bold words typed beneath it. Master developer. I blinked. Rubbed my eyes. Looked again. There was a clause attached, a tangle of legal terms that made my head spin until I spotted the magic line. All HOA actions subject to review and override by title holder of Lot 17A until board formally supersedes developer authority by vote of 75% quorum. I dropped into the nearest chair like my knees forgot how to function. Dorothy leaned over the counter, curious. "You find something?" I looked up at her, heart thudding like a jackhammer. I think I just inherited a nuclear bomb. 2 hours later, Patricia Valdez leaned across my kitchen table, scanning the covenant papers with a lawyer's laser focus. "Jesus, Mike," she whispered, "this isn't just a bomb. This is a blueprint for coup d'etat." Patricia had handled my divorce. Sharp, no nonsense, and 3 cups of espresso away from sainthood. She turned the page, tracing the developer clause with her finger. You have controlling rights over this HOA. I exhaled. All this time, she's been threatening me on property I have legal power to overrule. More than that, you can nullify fines, reverse ordinances, demand financial audits. Hell, you could call for board removal. A silence stretched between us. Outside, one of my cruise trucks rumbled past, the engine low and steady. The sound grounded me. What if I don't want to run an HOA? I asked, half laughing, half dreading. You don't have to, Patricia said. You just have to stop her and protect the people she's been bleeding dry. That night, I didn't sleep. I stood in my driveway, staring at Linda's house across the street. The porch light glowed soft yellow. Behind her windows, silhouettes moved. Her husband, her clipboard, her empire. She had no idea. She was the queen of a game she thought she'd mastered, not knowing the board had shifted beneath her. The power dynamic had just flipped so hard it rattled my bones. And with that knowledge came a choice. I could wipe her out immediately, call a meeting, drop the documents, take her throne. But deep down, I knew Linda wasn't just a petty tyrant. She was a machine. She'd built her power slowly, through fear, control, fake decorum. To beat her, I had to do the same, but smarter, legally, publicly. So when she fell, there'd be no doubt, and no return. Back in the kitchen, I poured a fresh cup of coffee and opened a new notebook. I wrote one word at the top of the first page, blueprint. Then I started listing names. Jake, Sarah, Mrs. Morgan, the victims, the allies, the witnesses. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were a crew, and I was about to build something Linda could never understand, justice. One page at a time. It started with gnomes. Mrs. Morgan's garden ornaments, to be exact. 3 smiling ceramic gnomes, placed neatly beneath a rose bush she'd nurtured for 20 years. Linda issued a formal violation letter declaring them aesthetic pollution. Then came Jake Patterson's twins, written up for leaving bicycles leaned against their garage door. Visual disorder, Linda called it. Sarah Mills was cited for her aging Civic, inconsistent with neighborhood prestige. And me? My trucks were now under daily surveillance. Every morning, Linda marched past my house like a one-woman audit, clipboard tight in her arms, heels cracking on pavement, eyes scanning my property like a drone strike in slow motion. I didn't react. Not yet. But I recorded everything. My kitchen table had become a war room. Bobby Morgan, Mrs. Morgan's son and a forensic accountant, hunched over HOA ledgers, highlighters bleeding neon yellow across page after page. She's cooking these numbers like a short-order grill, he muttered. Consulting fees, landscaping reimbursements, every single one matches a personal financial crisis. She's using HOA funds like her private emergency fund. Across from him, Jake pinned timelines on a corkboard that stretched wall to wall. Surveillance photo, copies of violation notices, meeting recordings. Every click of his mouse added another nail to Linda's coffin. Sarah Mills ran point on neighbor outreach. House meetings, legal handouts, simplified HOA rights in laminated sheets. I've taught 7th grade for 10 years, she told me one night as we sat on my porch under the porch light's soft hum. Nothing prepares you for an authoritarian with a clipboard. Pressure was building. Linda had started calling in favors. Former planning department buddies, now working as city inspectors, showed up at my house weekly. Alleged noise complaints, code violations, hazardous materials. Each time, they left empty-handed. Each time, she smiled tighter the next morning. But then she escalated. The foreclosure notices hit like coordinated strikes. Jake, Sarah, Mrs. Morgan, me. Certified letters, stamped with courthouse ink, demanding thousands in unpaid violation penalties and threatening legal seizure of our homes. It was bureaucratic terrorism, and it was working. Mrs. Morgan cried on my porch, hands shaking as she handed me her notice. She told me maybe I'd be happier in assisted living. She whispered, voice barely audible. That's when I knew this wasn't just harassment. It was exile. You ready? Patricia asked me the night before the annual HOA meeting. We sat at the war table, surrounded by binders and coffee mugs and righteous fury. I don't want revenge, I said. I want to break the machine. She nodded. Then we hit her where it counts, legitimacy. Everything in place? She smiled. She spent months digging a trench. We're just handing her the shovel. The next morning, Linda made one last move. A man in a $2,000 suit knocked on my door, briefcase in hand. I represent concerned members of the Maple Ridge HOA, he said, voice slick with artificial calm. My clients are willing to offer you a settlement. $50,000 cash for voluntary relocation and dismissal of all complaints. I stared at the cashier's check he slid across my table. Is this a bribe? I asked. He smiled. It's a solution. I picked up my phone. Smile. Click. You just joined the story, I said. By the time the HOA meeting rolled around, the room was at capacity. Neighbors packed wall to wall, whispering, sweating, hoping. Linda swept in with her usual air of command, flanked by her loyalists, Margaret, Bob, and a nervous Frank. The projector flickered to life. She cleared her throat. Thank you all for coming. Tonight we will discuss community beautification initiatives and introduce a necessary increase in assessment fees. Actually, I interrupted, stepping forward, voice loud and even. I'd like to address the board first. Linda's mouth pinched. This isn't on the agenda. It is now. I placed the master developer deed on the table, like it was the final piece in a long, brutal puzzle. Patricia stepped beside me, calm and confident. By rights of Subdivision, Charter 17A, she said, her voice ringing like gavel strikes. All HOA decisions must be approved by the current title holder of the developer lot. Gasps. Murmurs. Linda blinked. What were you talking about? I met her eyes. You spent months threatening the wrong man. Because I don't just live here, Linda. I held up the document. I built the damn foundation. The room fell into a silence, so sharp it could have cut steel. Linda stared at the document in my hand like it was a ghost. Her clipboard, usually gripped like a royal scepter, dangled useless at her side. I watched her eyes scan the title, Master Developer. Lot 17A, Governance Rights. For the first time since I moved to Maple Ridge, she looked small. Not weak, not frail, just cornered. Patricia stepped forward, placing the official stamped county certification beside the covenant for the crowd to see. This is real, she said, calm but deadly. Mike Torres holds original developer rights over Maple Ridge. That means, by law, all HOA ordinances passed without his consent are null and void. Murmurs erupted like popcorn kernels, short, sharp, disbelieving. Jake Patterson stood up from the third row, holding up a printed timeline. We have records of 37 violations issued without proper vote, he said. 24 selectively enforced, 10 affecting single mothers, 5 targeting elderly residents. Linda's eyes flicked toward the exit. Mrs. Morgan was already standing. You threatened to take my home, she said, voice cracking but firm. Said I was too old. Said I didn't belong. I baked cookies for this neighborhood for 20 years. You handed me an eviction notice like I was a trespasser. Tears welled in her eyes. Sarah stepped beside her, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. You tried to gentrify us out, Sarah said, and now you're out of moves. Linda slammed her clipboard on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. This is all a smear campaign, she snapped. He's manipulating you. Look at his trucks, his business. It doesn't belong in a community like this. I took a slow breath. The tension in the room coiled around my ribs like barbed wire. Exactly, I said. I don't belong. Not in your version of this place. But you forgot something, Linda. I pointed toward the back of the room. That's my cruise truck out there. Parked legally. Built half the driveways in this neighborhood. I poured the concrete your house stands on. Then I turned to the crowd. And I do belong. So does Mrs. Morgan. So do Jake and Sarah and every working-class family you try to scare out of here. You don't get to decide who's good enough. You don't get to weaponize bylaws because someone parks a truck or plants daisies instead of hydrangeas. Linda opened her mouth, then froze. Because Officer Martinez from the County Sheriff's Department stepped forward from the back of the room, a file folder in one hand, badge glinting in the overhead light. "Ma'am," he said, voice low but firm, "we'd like to ask you a few questions about misuse of HOA funds and harassment claims filed by multiple residents." Linda laughed, a tight, broken thing. "You can't be serious. This is all official," Martinez cut in. "And on record." Bob, her longtime board ally, slowly removed his name tag and set on the table. "I had no idea," he whispered. "I'm not going down with this." Then Margaret stood, shoulders slumped. "I joined this board to keep things tidy, not to destroy people's lives." And just like that, the last pillars of Linda's empire stepped away. Patricia leaned in, voiced just for me. "You want to press charges now?" I looked at Linda, shaking, silent, alone. "No," I said. "Let the audit speak first." "But she's off this board today." I turned to the crowd. Motion to remove Linda Hawthorne as HOA president, effective immediately. Dozens of hands rose into the air, like a wave washing away everything she'd built. I locked eyes with her one last time. "You built your house on sand," I said quietly, "and I build foundations." Linda Hawthorne left that room without her clipboard, the queen of the cul-de-sac dethroned. And outside, in the late golden hour, as the sun lit up the sidewalks she once patrolled, something even better than applause filled the air. Silence. But not the nervous kind, the kind that follows freedom. 6 weeks after the vote, the neighborhood was quiet again. But it wasn't the brittle silence that used to settle over Maple Ridge like dust under Linda's rule. It was softer now, less like a warning and more like an exhale. Lawns still looked neat, hedges still trimmed, but now no one flinched when a truck engine rumbled to life or when a garden gnome smiled beneath a rose bush. Freedom had a hum to it, like laughter down the block, like kids' bikes skidding across driveways, like concrete being poured before sunrise. And my trucks? Still parked in my driveway. Still spotless. Still legal. The fallout came quickly. Linda was removed by unanimous vote. She didn't even attend the second meeting, just sent a 2-sentence resignation email and put her house up for sale. For the first time in years, her front yard sat undecorated. No banners, no flyers, no clipboard-carrying shadows pacing at sunrise. She faded like a bad dream that stops being scary once you say it out loud. Turns out power built on fear has no spine when sunlight hits it. The audit Patricia initiated made the local news. Bobby's forensic accounting uncovered more than $50,000 in misused funds. The check registers alone were a case study in entitlement. Her son's landscaping company paid double market rate. Her bankruptcy attorney listed as a consultant. HOA money funneled into personal debt like the community was her savings account. The civil case is ongoing. She's facing multiple charges. I haven't heard her name in weeks, and that's exactly how it should be. Sarah Mills was elected HOA president with overwhelming support. Her first act? Repealing every ordinance passed under Linda's tenure and issuing full refunds to the residents she'd targeted. When she handed Mrs. Morgan her check, the old woman didn't say a word. She just nodded once, smiled, and walked straight home. An hour later, she planted 3 more garden gnomes. Different colors, brighter. Some things can't be erased. They can only be reclaimed. Jake Patterson and I still grab coffee most mornings. He's got a binder full of documentation from the last 6 months. He calls it the Manual for Fighting Back. Want to publish it someday. I told him I'd pour the concrete for the first library that shelves it. Sarah's organized monthly community dinners. Potlucks, folding tables in front yards. Music spilling from Bluetooth speakers. People talk more now. Less about violations, more about ideas. Someone started a community tool shed. Someone else proposed a scholarship for trade students. It's like the neighborhood remembered what it was before fear held the clipboard. As for me, I've gone back to work. Back to pouring driveways, setting foundations, building slabs that don't crack in the heat. But I also do something else now. Every time a neighbor walks by and thanks me, I tell them the truth. I didn't do this alone. Because I didn't. It took Jake's lens, Sarah's voice, Bobby's ledger, Mrs. Morgan's quiet courage. It took a neighborhood that decided it was done whispering and ready to roar. Last week, I stood in the center of the cul-de-sac just after sunset. My trucks were parked in their usual spot. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows. And for a moment, I could almost hear the ghost of Linda's heels clicking down the sidewalk, hunting for imperfections. But all I saw were families. Laughing, cooking, living. The fear was gone. And in its place, roots. Real ones. Deep. Strong. The kind you build things on. They say concrete sets stronger under pressure. I believe that now more than ever. Because Maple Ridge didn't just survive Linda Hawthorne. We hardened beneath her. And now we're unbreakable.